All right, hello and welcome to the Rook community meeting for August 24th, 2021. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen and then get started here. Except it's not like I better shut my door, there's background noise. So share screen. And there it is. All right, you can see the community meeting notes, I assume. Yes. Alrighty, so a quick checkup on the milestones we've got. So 1.5, I think we're at the point where no more releases are planned for that. And I think along with that, when we're really ready to say no more 1.5 builds, I think that's the point where we say, okay, Jenkins is really done. But I guess we'll come back to that topic a little later in the agenda. 1.5, is 1.5 already like 6 months old or more, huh? Or was it last December? Time is flying here. Anyway, 1.6, we did get the 1.6.9 release out yesterday. And that was all good to go. And it was fully based on the new GitHub Actions, which we Shubham helped us get done and backport to the 1.6 branch. So hooray, congratulations everyone, we're fully on GitHub Actions.
Yeah, a huge milestone for sure.
Right. Yeah, thanks Seb, especially for supporting all that effort too with Shubham. And yeah, it's so much, just feels so much better to be on GitHub Actions, don't have to worry about Jenkins updates or anything like that. As far as the next version of 1.6, so 1.6.10, probably in 3 or 4 weeks, we could do another one. I don't know of any urgent issues right now. And just to double check the project board, I think it should be pretty clean. Yeah, there's nothing on the to do or in progress. I think we got everything out yesterday that was known. That's good. And then on 1.7, we had our first .1 release just after the last community meeting, so almost 2 weeks ago. And with the bi-weekly cadence we're getting into now, the next one would be this Thursday. And I did not get a chance to look at the board to see what needs to be updated. But let's take a quick look here and talk through some of these issues. All right, so I've got peer spec migration in progress, flex volume to CSI conversion. That one is still in prototype phase, and hoping to make more progress on that one soon. We need to get people off flex in this 1.7 timeframe, because in 1.8 we're planning on removing it, as we discussed in previous meetings. We've got bucket notifications in progress and par through change on util new string or util sets. All right. I don't know if there's anything specific we need to talk about for 1.7 releases. Anyone else have something specific that I guess the main thing is if there's anything we want in the .2 patch release, let's make sure it's in the blocking release column before Thursday. But otherwise, it's just a bi-weekly cadence. All right. Let's see, thinking ahead for the 1.8 release, let's see, September, October, November, I think we'd be looking around early, probably the first week in December, realistically, for that. So we've got a while. All right, any comments about releases before we move on to the other topics? Let me just add a note here for 1.8. So for the topics, I guess we already mentioned this 1.6.9 is on GitHub Actions. Now with that, I did find one small issue during that release, which was this was the first 1.7 or 1.6 release based that where I tried to use the new tag action. So the tag action created the tag, but for some reason, the GitHub Actions that rely on that tag were not triggered to kick off the build. So I opened an issue for that. So I had to basically delete the tag and then go back and create the tag manually instead of using that action to trigger the build and release actions. Does that have any idea why that might have happened at a first impression?
Which one? Sorry.
So when I kicked off the tag action, so it's a new manual, you trigger it manually, right? Anyway.
Yeah. First time it
But
didn't
triggering
work,
that-
second time it works. Is that the one?
No, so it created the tag just fine. And it ran our new script that tells the changes between the last patch. So it worked perfectly by itself, but pushing the tag did not trigger the other actions, like the build and release actions that watch for the tags to be pushed to the repo, right? So it's like we want the other actions that release the build to be triggered off the tag, and they just weren't for some reason. But so what I was saying is I deleted the tag and pushed it manually, and then when I pushed it, the other events or actions triggered just fine.
Okay, maybe we have to look and see what this create tag action actually does. Because if you do create a tag and it's, I mean, we should click that button to create the tag and see if the tag actually appears. I mean, do we know if the tag actually got created correctly?
Yeah, the tag actually was created. I saw it in the repo. It seemed perfectly fine. But I opened that issue there and tried to describe it briefly too. But the other actions were not triggered.
Yeah, that's strange. Yeah, no, I remember that now. I remember, but I don't know. Maybe the user that created the tag. Yeah, I need to spend some time looking into this action. I'm not really sure what it does under the hood. Like who creates the tag? Like who's creating the tag? I think is a good way to start. Like who is the Git user creating the tag?
Right. Maybe it needs to be an authenticated user if other actions are gonna pick it up.
Yeah.
But I thought it was based on the user triggering the tag action. But yeah, Shubham can look at it. It's not really a rush. So the workaround is to just push the tag manually.
Yeah.
Until we fix that. Not a big deal. But yeah, so basically 1.6 and 1.7 are our active branches for releases, and they're all in GitHub Actions. So I'm thinking we'll just give it a month or so, and then we'll just totally turn off Jenkins and retire it permanently. So yeah, let's target end of September to decommission, just as to give us a little wiggle room in case something comes up for 1.5 or something else that we're not remembering. Okay, anything else around build and release before we go on to the big topic of the day? No, okay. Well, Blaine, you have a proposal for us. Do you want to walk us through?
Yeah, there's a lot here. This is based a lot on what I posted in the Slack channels. We've talked loosely several times and for a while about separating different backends from Rook core. So notably for us, like we got rid of, I think, MinIO and CockroachDB backend. So now there is still the NFS backend and the Cassandra backend. I think Cassandra gets very occasional updates from Yanis when we have like a CI issue, and NFS is, I think, maybe just small enough and just hasn't given us a lot of problem. But for new projects coming in, our idea is for them to have their own repo. And I think I think it's a good time to consider actually stripping out NFS and Cassandra, and no longer just sort of implicitly quote unquote supporting them. They get updates to whatever Kubernetes version they get released, but I think if anything major happened, like we can't fix any issues. If there's like a major incompatibility, we won't do anything about it. So we're in a sort of middle place where we imply support, but don't actually like really plan for the support. And we could just, I think, fork the existing Rook repo into Rook NFS and Rook Cassandra, and disable or remove the GitHub actions that are Ceph related, remove the like make build targets that are related to Ceph and the like backend that is not part of that that repo. And then in our Rook repo, we can do the same, remove the Cassandra and NFS stuff. One of the, I think, long-term gains that we get from this in the Rook, in the primary Rook repo, is that we can simplify some of the like make targets and build tooling, which a lot of the complexity derives from supporting the multiple backends from a time when Rook, I think that was Rook's goal from CNCF's kind of feedback was to support more backends. Yeah, Red Hat has a day of learning on Friday, which means I have a day to do whatever I want. And there's, yeah, another person I've been working with also interested in helping with this split out. So it would be nice to have a decision by Friday, since that's when I would allocate time to
spend a day on it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. Just to reiterate, maybe. So with the GitHub actions in place, so this makes it a lot easier to have the actions just running on separate repos and just target the operators that are in that repo. That'll be really nice. Operator only gets released when there's actually updates to it. Because yeah, like you said, we're just implicitly supporting it, but not really supporting it, which isn't really healthy for the operator. If we give the impression of supporting something that's not really supported. They're both, NFS and Cassandra are also still alpha state, which still means that upgrades aren't guaranteed and support is just super limited. So we really would like to have community members step up and do more to support them, but we just haven't seen that until now. Well, we still haven't seen that. And so long-term support is just a struggle. Even right now with the Cassandra tests, they've been failing for the last couple of weeks, and Yen is meaning to look into them, but he's busy even moving to a new place, moving across countries and everything. So he is a little busy right now. It's hard for him to just maintain it himself too, since he doesn't work on it for his full-time job either. And yeah, but hopefully we can get those tests fixed soon, so we don't start off a new repo with them broken. One question I had about the GitHub Actions, I wonder if we have the actions mainly enabled for just the Rook repo. I wonder if when we go to Rook/Cassandra and NFS, if we'll have to get our limits increased. Well, we probably won't need limits increased so much for the other ones anyway. Maybe just the default limits will work fine for the NFS and Cassandra repos.
Yeah, I think there are maybe 3 tests for Cassandra and 1 for NFS.
Right.
I looked last week and now I've forgotten.
Yeah, and it's not like it's also
yeah.
receiving a huge amount of contributions anyways. So
Right.
it's probably acceptable that we stick with the default limits.
Right. Or, yeah, we probably just don't need to worry about it. But yeah, so getting it set up may take a bit of work, but it seems like it's a worthwhile investment for sure. It's also the pattern we want in the long term. Like if another storage provider actually came to Rook and said we want to do it, well, we've already said you have to create a new repo, and if we already have the pattern in place, it will just be easier going forward anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely an amount of like things that we can do that I have not necessarily planned to do. We could, for Cassandra or NFS, not like treat it as a like full fork, like I have sort of implied, and use the Rook repo as a library that is used by Rook Cassandra or Rook NFS. And any new operator might choose to do that or might not, depending on what their, I guess, desires are. And we could show what that looks like. I don't think that's quite as simple of a set of changes that I think I could accomplish that in a day.
Right. Yeah, I agree. If we just leave factoring out Rook as a library as a separate thing, if somebody from the community wants to come do that, it would be a good thing for the long term. But I think if we're not going to get real maintainers on them, then it doesn't make sense to worry about that right now.
Right.
We'll just fork it and say, here it is.
Yeah. And then I think the NFS and Cassandra operators can have their own release cadence. It would probably make sense for them to just continue on with the versioning scheme, just at a different pace. So as not to kind of break anything, but yeah, I mean, if that happens, we can also talk a bit more then.
Right. And maybe we consider, if there are changes, we just do a minor release. Well, I don't know. If somebody contributes a change, we probably want to look at doing a release with that change if it's not very often, or we can find a cadence for those operators too.
Yeah.
That just assumes we get contributions.
Yeah. It's also interesting since those operators are both in alpha. I think it is better if we would release them as like 0 dot something, but because they already have been released possibly under 0 dot something, or they already have releases under 1 dot something, then it becomes confusing. I'm not sure how to indicate like an alpha state other than maybe just, specifying with all versions that, just have an alpha tag.
Yeah, as the release, I guess we're not saying there's an alpha tag. It's basically just on the CRDs. The CRDs are marked as the version v1 alpha 1. So that's the versioning scheme, I guess, instead of putting it in the release number. Yeah, well, I think all this makes sense. I'd like to sync up with Jared on it, just as an official steering committee thing, since it is such a big impact to the overall project. But I think we should be fine with it. It is more of a kind of day-to-day thing, and he's just not into the day-to-day things as much, so he'll say, okay, let's do it.
Cool.
So I'll sync up with him.
Yeah, and I think it's a really natural move as well. And it's really about this like in tree versus out of tree thing. And yeah, I guess out of tree makes a lot of sense in that case.
Right. And I think it makes sense to keep the Ceph operator in Rook just because so many people are relying on that one.
Right, and I think a lot of people also see Rook as Rook Ceph.
Exactly.
So yeah.
I mean, we could discuss, moving Rook to Rook Ceph, but I think that would cause some amount of confusion.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't vote for that. I think we would be losing also too much history as well, like migrating GitHub issues and things like this, project boards. I think we will be losing so much history that it's going to be really troublesome.
If we did anything, potentially we can rename repos, right? We could rename Rook to Rook Ceph, but I don't think that's worth it either.
No, yeah.
Yeah, and GitHub would handle like the automatic forwarding and stuff, but yeah, even still,
Right.
Agreed.
I guess something to consider, but yeah, I don't want to do that yet, at least. Yep. Sounds good. Any other discussion points around that?
I don't think so. I think there will certainly there will certainly be things that come up. Like I just remembered, documentation will come up. So we'll have to figure out whether we should still produce documentation and like if documentation should be at a particular version or how that will work.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. The documentation may need a bit of work because what I've really wanted for a long time is that each storage provider would have its own set of documentation pages, so we don't have to have them overlap,
right.
which would follow along well with this repo rework, where each provider would publish its own docs according to its own version scheme, and it would just maybe we can put it under a different subfolder on the website so that each is published on its own schedule and everything. So I think, and then the website would just need to link to each storage provider's documentation instead of having the one overall help link.
Yeah, maybe something to talk to Jared about would be whether someone at Upbound has like an idea for an ability to spend maybe I don't know. I'm hoping if it's someone who works in that domain a lot, they could spend like a day on it and actually like get it done similarly to
Exactly
the effort I hope to achieve.
Right. Yeah, if we had to do it, it'd be a lot more ramp up time on that. Yeah, I'll include that in the discussion with Jared. Right. And so far, we don't have a GitHub issue to track this proposal, right? It's just been a Slack discussion with maintainers and now here. So maybe it's time to go ahead and if you want to open a GitHub issue so that the community is more aware of what would be coming with this change. And I think we're saying, so the Docker repos wouldn't change. They would still be, each storage provider would still have its own repo just like today for publishing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think any of that needs to change.
Right.
Does it make sense to open a discussion instead?
Instead of the issue.
Yeah, I'll say it's a
Sure.
discussion. And then I suppose that's a change for 1.8. That 1.8 will really only be a release of Rook-Ceph.
Right. Mm-hmm. And well, potentially we could consider having a release of the other two, whether they're called 1.7. Whatever or 1.8, once we do all the rework, so we can confirm their CIs are working and they're not totally dead.
Yeah,
I think we should do that.
Yeah, I guess like there aren't really any new features, but it is like a substantial change, and I think worth doing like release notes for. So we could like cut 1.8 versions of Cassandra and NFS early.
Of all three.
Yeah.
Or yeah.
And then just say that like this is the like officially like these releases, like anything after this is not really planned, but will be from like a community that comes up around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully with an invitation that people want to rise up to and contribute to, as opposed to it basically being an indirect deprecation notification.
Mm-hmm.
Where,
yeah. And then they can have whatever release cadence they want.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
Cool.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion.
Okay. And on the action items, I still have the same thing as for the last 3 months to fix the license scanning logo. And yep, I'll chat with Jared. Any other items that people want to discuss that weren't on the agenda? All right, with that, we'll call it a meeting, and thanks everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye now.